Okay, this is a new video and it's in regards of bias. And all I can say is for people, I told you so. I did say that what was going to happen with journalists such as Josh Wilding on Comic Book Movie. And what I'm kind of pleased about is on social media is I'm starting to see one or two people now starting to notice what he's doing. Now, in regards of the Flash movie, which hasn't been performed very well at the box office. Now, all the stuff in terms of regard of what was going to happen, what was going to transpire with this movie. If you go back and watch my my videos that I've done over the last couple of months and weeks, and you would have seen that everything that I've said was going to happen, what was going to happen with the movie, and in terms of with the media and with the Comic Book Movie and Josh Wilding in general, with their articles, it's exactly what I said how it was going to pan out in terms of what was going to happen. Now, first and foremost, I would just like to say that obviously we know that there's been legal problems with the main actor Ezra Miller. So I just wanted to say that that obviously there's been people who have felt uncomfortable with probably wanting to going to see the movie with obviously what he's been doing in his private life, and that to me is totally understandable because there's a difference between what the actor's done in his private life to whether or not the film itself as a whole is actually any good. So I can do understand and completely agree with people who have chosen not to see it because of his actions, and that's perfectly. People are entitled to choose not to sit there and watch that. So I thought I would state that in the beginning of this video before we move further on with this piece about bias. And I think some of it, in terms of what's going on in general, I do think is biased because at the moment, as we know already now, Marvel, when it comes to the superhero genre now, have got a foothold on the on these cinematic movies, and quite rightfully so. I mean, with them getting obviously Kevin Feige, I mean, obviously it all started. Although people don't realize that he's been at Marvel and working on the Marvel films a lot longer than what people realize. People just see it, it's from Iron Man and Captain America and Thor, but he's actually he's been behind the scenes a lot longer than what people actually even realize. And there's no taking away that Kevin Feige has done a masterful job in creating the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Bearing in mind that obviously the legal problems that Marvel were in before, where they had to sell off their franchises, characters to different studios, obviously to Paramount, to Sony, and to Fox. Otherwise, during the time they were facing bankruptcy. So, for them to sit there and to bring everything back in, and obviously we've got Disney Plus now. We've got the Marvel Cinematic TV shows now about. Don't take for granted the fact that it would have been very difficult to, to be able to sit there and to envisage this vision in terms of what Marvel and Disney has done under the eye of Kevin Feige. So there's no taking away on how successful Disney and Marvel have been under Kevin Feige's watch. So I'll say that first and foremost. But we do know that there is a bias and I think it's more so the media, whether it's websites, forums, and even newspapers, where they're very biased, and especially with they're used to this certain formula that what Marvel, have, which has worked for them really well in the cinematic universe, and how any other person that comes along, they're always going to sit there and find it difficult to come along and then try to have a piece of the pie. Now, there's no saying that Warner Brothers have made a huge lot of mistakes over the years in terms of what they've been doing with their DC universe, and especially obviously seeing the comic book genre now becoming a successful franchise, and obviously they want a piece of that, especially with in the beginning. Obviously, they had films like Superman the movie. Prior to that, right, they had obviously the Superman movie, it's TV shows from the 50s and 40s. So and the Fleischer cartoons. So that was obviously their bread and butter. And obviously after that, you had Batman with in the '60s series, and then obviously you had Michael Keaton, and obviously making his live action debut in Batman '89. So obviously now that it's become every studio is looking for a successful franchise, it was pretty clear that DC obviously wanted a piece of that, and especially when you look at their comic portfolio of characters that they have under the belt, they have just as much as Marvel, maybe even more. And obviously, we're just used to the fact, obviously, that Batman and Superman, and that's all we've ever been used to. And now, obviously, over the years, obviously, we've had characters like Flash, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, Aquaman now just being established. And whether it's been in the CW shows with the Arrowverse, with Arrow, obviously we've had the Flash, we've had Batwoman, and we've had Supergirl. Which, remember, there was a Supergirl movie which didn't do very well, and people expected it to after coming off the back of the Christopher Reeve Superman movie. So you can see why Warner Brothers obviously want to build that franchise, and obviously there's a lot of things that over the years that they've done right, and there's also a lot of things that they've done wrong. I have said in past videos that I will do like a breakdown in what in the stuff that has gone wrong and right for DC, and how they've been handling their franchises and where they should go. And obviously now under the eye of James Gunn, it's what will the future of the DCU be. But we do know that there's a bias, and I've already explained in other videos where, for example, I did say what was going to happen with the Flash. I do expect you can quote me on saying this from now, and I hope I'm wrong. Obviously, that with the Blue Beetle movie coming out on the 18th of August. And obviously, most people will have heard of the Jaime character, obviously from Young Justice, and obviously depending on your age group. I mean, me, it was like Ted Kord, and then shortly after that, it was the Jaime character. So it's gonna be interesting on what people's thoughts are gonna be, but I can predict that it's probably gonna get average scores, and I think it's gonna get a mixed review, and people will be complaining about too much humor, probably not understanding certain things that are going on or certain Easter eggs. They'll probably will be complaining about the third act of the movie not being kind of very good, or the villain not being strong enough. That's my basic prediction on what I think is going to happen. And if they do, again, I think it's going to maybe do all right, maybe a little bit underperform, and then there's going to be even more doubt. But that's going to be my prediction, because you know how people like Josh Whedon and Comic Book Movie are like, is that they'll look for any little flaws here and there, like bloodhounds, and then they'll be making multiple articles, doing what they're doing. But that's my prediction and what I think is going to happen with Blue Beetle, and then eventually, and I'll go on record as saying that it's a similar thing that's going to happen with Aquaman as well. Very similar thing. I don't know if this comes out. If Aquaman will be coming out in 2023. I think it's meant to be towards the end of the year. I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on that. But what I do find funny about Josh Whedon is that obviously you knew what he was going to do, what he was going to do, what's going to happen with the Flash, and obviously I haven't gone on there in over 2 weeks on Comic Book Movie for 2 weeks, because I know the fact that if I'm going to end up going to start raving mad of his articles, and and I kind of just want to sit and kind of chill out from that. But from what I've seen about what other people have said, he's kind of been at it. Now, what I find strange is that if you look at the score, or from the IMDb score of The Flash, and even the Rotten Tomato score of The Flash, both scores actually been higher than the last couple Marvel movies, especially movies like The Eternals and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And what I find really funny is, I'll give you an example. Josh Whedon could prior to when Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania came out, he couldn't use. He saw loads of positive articles coming out from him about the movie. Obviously, bootlicking and shilling, as we already know. And then as soon as the review scores kind of came out from other critics, and then obviously the Rotten Tomato scores came out, and then obviously it started to drop, and then it started to underperform in the cinema. You watch how fast, especially with the second week of the box office numbers dropping, you watch how fast Josh Wilding then stopped making articles about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and then quickly moved on to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And then as soon as the positive review scores came out and the Rotten Tomatoes scores came out, you watch how fast he was quick on salivating over the scores and making articles upon articles positively about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and especially with it taking huge numbers at the box office of its run. I don't know what it currently is at now, but I know it's already within the first 2 weeks of its release. It overtook Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. But you watch how fast he was quick to sit there and to praise how well the movie was, and then how successful the movie was at the box office. But as soon as the Marvel movies like Eternals and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania didn't do very well, he dropped it like a pebble in a lake. Didn't even mention it and stopped talking about it. Now, I find this weird. Now, don't take my word for it. I'm only saying what I've seen with my own two eyes. You can go back onto the comicbookmovie.com site and then go back through the timeline and see for yourself that how quickly that he dropped his focus on those Marvel movies the minute that the critics and the Rotten Tomato scores and the movie box office underperformed. Now he only seems to focus on Marvel movies when they're doing successful, and this is another thing that in life that I've noticed about people is that I've noticed about people that when you put in the hard work into something, especially when it's unknown and nobody knows about it, nobody wants to sit there and be along with you along the ride in terms of trying to find out what the particular thing is about and the work that you put into it. And as soon as the particular thing then becomes successful and becomes famous and everybody's captivated by it, everybody now wants to jump onto the gravy train, which to me is really lazy, because you've put in the work into something, but they don't want to sit there and go along for the ride. I mean, there's been loads of TV shows where not many people bother to focus on them. Shows such as Invincible. I would say it's an adult super cartoon series that's been on Amazon Prime. You've had like Sylvester Stallone's new series, which has been renewed for season 2, the Toulouse King. In the past, you've had shows like Westworld, where nobody kind of was, aside from the fact if you've heard of the movie from the 70s and its sequel, Future World, nobody pretty much, when obviously they did the pilot and the first episode for each of these series, nobody sat there and gave these shows the time of day. Similar thing with like shows like 24. But then as soon as these shows obviously start to become successful now, and now it's cool to love it, everybody now jumps onto the bandwagon now, because obviously everybody, is like watching it now. And as I said before with the Marvel thing, I mean, some of it, as I said, some of it is to do with that Warner Brothers are to blame for what's going on. It's not taking away, as I said before at the beginning, what Marvel and Kevin Feige and Disney have done with such a successful franchise. To sit there and even to do like the Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame, to put so many superheroes in those two movies and that scope. That's a very, very difficult thing to do. So hats off to Kevin Feige for doing such a fantastic job. Although I have said that for me, Phase 4 hasn't been, my kind of favourite part of the MCU at the moment. Although I have to make the first episode so far, from what I've seen of Secret Invasion, has been very good. especially the shocking ending, but has been very good. So there's no taken away from that. But as I said, we do know that there is a bias, and I do think that some of it is the fact that it's the media that are creating this kind of like fanboy wars into what people should think and what people should like. As I've said many a time in so many other videos, is I when it comes to the game consoles, I love Nintendo, I love Sony, I love Xbox, and when it comes to say clothing ranges, I love and shoes, I love like Nike and Adidas, and in the past I've also worn Puma as well. And a similar thing with my football club, Tottenham, which I've supported for many decades. And a similar thing I would say, obviously, with DC Comics and Marvel, is although I like all these different companies, I don't owe them anything. So I'm not going to sit there and bootlick any of these companies or shill to them, because I am not working for any of these companies. I am not on the board of any of these companies, and I don't have shares in any of these companies, and I don't work for them. So although I enjoy all of these products and all of these franchises, etc., that I've just mentioned, I am not going to sit there and bootlick and shill to any of them, because they don't owe me anything. And that's why I get kind of really irate when I see all these fanboys fighting over, oh, Xbox is better, PlayStation is better, Nintendo's better, that one's worse, Marvel's better than DC. You got some DC fanboys the same way, you got the Snyder fanboys doing exactly the same thing. I don't owe any of them anything. At the end of the day, from all these different companies, all I want is to be entertained or enjoy the product that I've paid my hard money for, or I've gone to watch something. If I feel something is bad as a consumer with any of these companies or any other company, I'm gonna call it out. Same thing with customer service from each of these companies. I'm gonna call it out. And having called it out, and I'm gonna prove how I can call this out. In the past, I've used customer care from Xbox, which I found terrible. The only time I've ever been able to, I've been managed to sit there and try to contact them, is via Twitter. And some of the time you don't get an answer, and sometimes I get a reply from them maybe 2 or 3 months later. They do not have a dedicated email in the UK, as far as I know. They don't even have a customer service number, which I think they did have at one point, but it's gone. So they've been pretty bad. And I love Xbox, as people know. I've got an Xbox One S and I've got a Series X. Loving it. When I've used Game Pass, I've loved it. There are times when I haven't loved it. Again, with their increase of the Game Pass, the increase of it, and with the increase of the console, same to what Sony did. Don't agree with it at all. I'm fortunate because I got given those two consoles. But nevertheless, as a consumer, I can 100% not like it. But there have been positives where the backward compatibility, I've absolutely loved it. Where they give the option to update some of the games, I've absolutely loved it. The controller's really nice. In terms of the form factor of the consoles, the software, and it's been really brilliant. So I can praise something and I can dispraise it when I feel something is right. Sony's customer service. I have managed to phone them when I had the problems with my PS3, which I don't know if I've ever told that story. I think I did with my rant with CX. Their customer service in terms of ringing them up were actually really great in terms of how good the customer service is. In the past, I had a problem with my PSP, the service, and then I remember I had to get it replaced. And I thought what would happen is that they would take my PSP, assess it, and then obviously you'd have to pay them to replace the other one. And what was really great was I don't know if they still do this service, right, by the way, but I actually paid them for them to replace the PSP. A courier came over and then literally swapped the consoles around. And that was actually really fantastic that they actually did that. And in terms of what they were going to do in terms of if I needed my PS3 fixed, although it would have cost a bit of money, they were extremely helpful. Now, on the social media side and the email side, they've been absolutely poor. But you know, as I said before, customer service wise, again, what I've done, I haven't liked about the PS4, even the PS5, the backward compatibility issues. Of course, you can play PS4 games by the PS5, although some PS4 games don't work on it. But other than the PS5 console, I've actually been really enjoying it. So I can say Nintendo love their consoles. I have had problems for me. I do wish, like with the Nintendo Online games, which if you pay the subscription, I'm lucky that someone's put me on a family plan, so I don't have to pay for it. Again, I'm extremely thankful to the friend of mine who did it for me. But I do wish that you were given the option, and from time to time they give you a 7-day trial, which is great. And then slowly with the expansion plus, they've been slowly giving you more content like the Game Boy content and GameCube and N64 and Game Boy Advance. So that's been great. But one complaint is that I do wish that if you're somebody that actually wants to own the game outright rather than have the membership, I do think that they should give you the option to buy the games individually if you don't want to own the membership. And I think, they should be doing that. Again, emailing Nintendo, for me, it's been hit and miss, because in the past they haven't answered and sometimes they haven't. The telephone thing has been a bit poor, so I think their customer service has been a bit poor. But generally speaking, I still love their games, but the customer service has been a lot to be desired about. So you can see that although I love all three of those companies, I can criticize them and then give credit where credit is due. And the problem that I have with Josh Whedon is, if his view is that he prefers the structure and the Marvel formula that they use in their movies and that's what entertains him, then fine. I would sit there and I would sit there and actually say, you know what, he's totally within his right. If that's what floats his boat and that's what he likes and that's what he wants, and in other people I've known that had that viewpoint, then that's totally fine. But he's not going to do this. Now, why, may you ask, is he not going to admit to he's going to sit there and do this? Because there are some people out there, especially on social media, that love outrage. Now, the real reason why I think he does this is that he knows what it is that he's doing. He does clickbait titles. He also does clickbait articles and keeps coming up with trying the new ways of trying to milk an article out of a disaster or something that's he doesn't like. Now, the real reason why, as I said before, that he's done this, I may have mentioned this in the past, it's simply because of the fact that he's trying to get clicks and views. And that's why he does his clickbait articles and he keeps milking something that bad that's happened or something that hasn't done very well. Because what he wants to do is for the people to click on there, then you get the toxicity in the comment section where people are agreeing with him or people are fighting with him. And then at the end of the day, he just sits back while the views accumulate and the comments accumulate. This is the real reason why he's not going to sit and openly admit that he's a Marvel shill or Marvel fanboy. He's not going to do this. Now, I dare and I challenge Josh Whedon for a month to write an article that isn't clickbait, that isn't milking a disaster at a particular franchise or a company, and to write something that's actually positive and that's actually non-biased, informative, and that is objective. But we all know that he's not going to do this because people then won't click on the article. And that's the real reason why he does this, because it's the outrage which we now, especially with the social 24-hour media, online media and that things that we have, it's people being outraged about something. My brother was telling me this story about, obviously, The Little Mermaid. Obviously, people remember obviously the Disney version where obviously it's based on the fable, and obviously Disney, as what they always usually do with a lot of their fables, they've Disneyfied it. Obviously now they've made The Little Mermaid into a live action, but now the character of Ariel is a person of color, or obviously this got people outraged. bearing in mind that at the Little Mermaid, the events of the Little Mermaid were set in the Caribbean. Now, what color of people mostly do you see in the Caribbean? I'll let that sink in. Now, the original fable of Little Mermaid, which people can look up. I'm not gonna spoil it. You can look this up for yourself. It's not gonna be too hard to type in Little Mermaid, the fable of it, the true story behind it on Google. You can read it for yourself in detail. It had a much darker ending to how the Disney animated movie ended. It was all happy ever after. Same thing with the live action. Now, the country in which it originated from, when obviously they heard of the story of that the Ariel was going to be a person of color, the people obviously of the country, it was in Europe, and I don't want to sit and say it in case I get it wrong. Again, you can look this up. They weren't even upset about the fact that they changed Ariel into a person of color. And you want to know the reason why? It was simply because of the fact that the story of the Little Mermaid was completely changed anyway. So if you can completely change a fable, then changing the race of the actual lead character is going to be the least of their problems. They weren't outraged, but guess who were outraged? The media were. Now, bear in mind what I said. It's set in the Caribbean. Again, as I said before, let that sink in. It's the media that were sitting there and were pumping out the agenda of this outrage culture. It's the same media, whether it's with newspapers, whether it's the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Guardian, in the UK, by the way, that print out all these dodgy and misinformed stuff. Again, they tell you what they want you to think. This is the main reason why, for example, I know we're going slightly off topic here, why I don't even sample, for example, with the various different news channels that are available in the UK. Although I keep abreast of what is going on in the news, like, for example, the tragic news of the 5 lives that were lost to the submarine for the people that went down to see the wreck of the Titanic. So I was aware of that and what happened. But generally speaking, with the news, I don't bother with the news, because what they do is that they most of them all have their agenda, whether it's left or right, in terms of what they want you to think. And it's exactly the same thing with newspapers. The same thing. They sit there, they don't want you thinking for yourself, or making decisions for yourself, or finding out the truth for yourself. That's why I've made jokes like, I don't read newspapers. The only thing I use them for is to line my cat's litter tray, which is actually quite handy. It saves, especially with these free newspapers, it actually saves me having to go out and buy cat lining paper for my cat litter tray for my cat. So at least it's doing something positive. But that's the problem with this media. You are told what to think and what to like. You saw the media in terms of what happened with their review score of the Super Mario Brothers the movie. Most of the media hated it. You can look for yourself. It's not just me saying it. Look at these media outlets, whether it's online or these newspapers. Again, you can do the research yourself. So you don't need me telling you what I'm saying is gospel. Look for yourself, because it's very black and white. They did not like the movie. But the people that grew up on Super Mario Brothers and who are all video game fans, or the people that grew up in it or have got children, absolutely loved it. Guess what happened? Made over $1 billion. And now there's talk of what they want to do with the sequel. There's even talk about maybe a possible doing this, giving them the same treatment to Zelda. And who knows, we could even see a Star Fox or a Metroid, which I would love to sit and see them do. Or, you know what I mean? That would be absolutely brilliant. But you saw what the media did. Oh, it's utter crap. It's just a nostalgia fest, etc., etc., etc. This is what the media was pumping into people's heads. So what does the average person go? Oh, I'm not going to go and see this because they said so, it was rubbish. Even places like IGN do that with some video games, where they said Aliens Isolation. They didn't like it because it was an action. Because it wasn't an action game. Yes, the game is hard, and yes, it's got its faults, but it's actually a really good game. And it's I heard it's really good on the Switch as well. Plus you got the choice of the fact that it's a hybrid on the Switch. You can play it on the screen, play it on in handheld, and it's always on sale. So it's actually a good game, not without its faults, hard in places, but it's a very enjoyable, rewarding game. But again, you saw what someone like IGN did. They did a similar thing with Resident Evil 2 Remake, where they didn't even play the game properly, and they got caught out. And this has happened before. And they got caught out simply because of other people who have played the game and know their stuff. Now, as I said before, there's nothing wrong with using these things as a guide. But I don't take what a lot of these people say as gospel. I prefer thinking for myself and judging for myself. Yes, I know cinema tickets, video games can be expensive, and it's a lot of money to waste on something, but you know it's going to be good. This is why sometimes finding a YouTuber that has got doing the research yourself, finding people who've got similar tastes, maybe even a friend who's got the game, maybe even some rental services that you can use to try out a game, or even demos that you can try out. These things can help. There's been many a movie that I've that people have said, oh, it's bad, and I've absolutely enjoyed it for what it is. I don't expect it to be an Oscar-winning performance of a movie or a TV series, but I've really enjoyed it. Right? Same thing with some video games. Somebody, that video game could be being bad, it's average. Now again, when there's been some video games where I'm unsure about, or I'm unsure about that particular video game, the most of the time, what I do is I just wait for a sale, and even if I have to wait for a year, 2 or 3 years, that's what I'll do, and then I'll pick it up. And sometimes you can have games that at full price the game may not necessarily be perfect or worthy of a full purchase, but then when it's in a sale, discounted or given away virtually for nothing, then it's not so bad because you're not paying so much money for it. And I've enjoyed it. I've been in a game where it's been, say, like £40-50. It's dropped to maybe like under £10. Obviously, I'm using the UK currency because that's where I am, and it's dropped to like maybe between £5 to £10. And I've bought it, and rather than spend the 50 quid, it's made it an easy pill to swallow. Games such as Gotham Knights, obviously people complain about obviously it running at 30% frames per second and not running at 60. And also there's a lot of grinding in the game. And when the game came out, I've seen it in the UK for roughly between £60 and £70. And my local Currys was selling it for £9.99. Luckily, I'd won £10 on the lottery, so I basically bought that and I didn't pay it. So I didn't essentially have to pay for the game. But even if I was paying for it for £9.99, even with those little problems with the games it's had, and obviously it didn't, Southbite didn't do well, even at £10, rather than it being £60 and £70, that to me is a really good price for that game. I may not necessarily I would have paid the £60 to £70 for the problems that game had. But at £10 at £9.99, that's an absolute steal. And I know that I'm going to be doing a stream of it, and a playthrough of it. So I'll be streaming it on Twitch and then obviously putting it as a playthrough on YouTube. So look out for that in the future. I am going to be really thoroughly. I know I'm going to enjoy the game. Obviously, because I'm a DC fan, and obviously I'm a huge fan of the characters, obviously like Nightwing and Robin and Batgirl and Red Hood. So I'm a fan of the Batman family anyway. Even with games like Spider-Man, I always knew that game was great. And obviously you've got Spider-Man 2 coming out later in the year for the PS5. I think it's a PS5 only. And then I told the story about how I had a refund on something, and then I basically got the that helped to pretty much pay for Spider-Man on the PS4, which at the time was about £12 in CX. Now it's gone up to £18 now, believe it or not. And I got it, and it was 12. It was £10, then it was 12. So I think I only paid £2 out of my own pocket. And then I won £5, and which paid for the PS5 upgrade, which also came along with the free the free storyline DLCs. Although I know from the playthroughs I've seen of Spider-Man on the PS4, I knew I would have loved it anyway. But I wasn't prepared to pay the price. I wanted the Game of the Year edition, which had all the DLC, and obviously you had to buy it brand new because they give you the Game of the Year stuff on a code. So if you get the game used, it's going to be completely and utterly useless. So, and even at a brand new prices, the game was still expensive. But me having to wait for it for at the right time, getting credit here and there, and then winning a little bit of money here and there, which helped pay for it. That was more than looking forward to sit there and playing. Again, I'll be doing a live stream of that. Although I will bear in mind that you might see in some of the licensed music in some of my video game playthroughs in the future, you might see it muted because obviously you get copyright strikes for some of the music, and I don't know why some companies don't allow you to turn it off. But the YouTube Studio app, once that you've got the video downloaded, it does, if you get copyright strike, it does allow you to mute that segment. So if you do hear muted segments in any of my future playthroughs, then you'll know why. But as I said before, for me, I love DC, I love Marvel. I just don't. A lot of these fanboy wars are just created by a lot of these media people just to sit there on an outrage, just to sit there to have fanboy wars. Most people don't realize that companies like Marvel and DC, these people all know each other. They all have lunch together. A lot of the writers in DC, a lot of these writers, comic book writers, whether they write or artists, work both, especially some of my freelance. Some of them have worked for both Marvel and DC. There's even been collaborations with DC and Marvel, and there's a rumor that James Gunn said in the future that they don't rule out maybe them doing a movie crossover with the Marvel and DC movies in the future. Although I think that's going to be on bated breath. But again, that you would love to live and hope. That would be interesting in the future if the two companies were willing to sit there and do it. But yeah, as I said before, it's this bias as to why people have to pigeonhole themselves into certain franchises. It's like, Star Trek or Star Wars. I love both. I'm not going to sit there and pick Android or Apple. I prefer Apple just because of the software, but some people prefer Android. I'm not going to sit there and make articles or videos attacking Android because that's what some people prefer. That's fine. But I just think this whole biased shill thing that we're kind of seeing, and especially in the comic industry and the comic movie stuff, is completely and utterly stupid. And as I said before, with people like Comic Book Movie and people like Josh Walding, I don't know why they just don't come out there and just admit it. They have the balls to sit there to be truthful. Again, as I said before earlier in this video, we know why Josh Walding's doing it. And slowly but surely, I'm seeing people on social media calling him out. Obviously, he had me on block because I called him out for his stuff. And as I said, you can go back through my videos that I've done over the past few months, and you can see that every one of the stuff that I've said in terms of what he was going to do and what Comic Book Movie were going to do was 100% on the nose. As I said, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Blue Beetle and with Aquaman, and what will happen with obviously now there's been news of with Superman Legacy where people are being auditioned for the roles of the characters. So it's going to be interesting as to what the costume's going to look like, who's going to be casting the roles, the teaser trailers, the costumes, as I said before, the music, the actual storyline, the trailer when it eventually does come out. It's going to be very interesting as to see what's going to happen. And obviously with Chapter 1, with James Gunn's thing, Chapter 1 titled Gods and Monsters. It's going to be interesting to see as to what his take's going to be. But I can guarantee you that Josh Walding and Comic Book Movie are going to crap on it, on what James Gunn's vision in terms of what he's going to do with it. I hope I'm wrong, that Josh Walding kind of does see the light and try to be a proper comic book fan, but I don't see that honestly happening. Again, I can be humble. I can sit there and and say, honestly say that I hope I'm wrong. And then I'll just leave you right with this thought that on when it comes to, and I've said this many a time, whenever I do anything, when it comes to reviews of products, food reviews, video games, anything like that, first and foremost, it's only my opinion. People want to use my stuff, what I say, as a guide, that's fine. But at the end of the day, make up your own mind. Don't say what I'm saying. What I'm saying is 100% gospel. Also, anything whatever you see me, the difference between me and a lot of these media people is I speak as a fan of whether it's comics, video games, food, etc., etc., etc. But what I'm sorry, but what I can tell you is, is that you will always see me being objective, me being 100% honest in what I feel about something, and I will always be, as before, I will be honest and have integrity, and always will be objective on any of the stuff I do. If in the future that I get sponsored by certain companies or I get given something for free, I will tell you, and I am not going to sugarcoat anything in the future, fingers crossed, that I get given in the future, which I hope, the big companies out there that are listening, that want me to review products. And even if I review a product from a company and then they shun me because they don't like what I have to say, that's their business. That's no skin off my nose. Because all you're going to get from me, as I said before, is honesty, heart, being objective, and integrity. And that's my video on bias.